Hello, testing. All right. Going live again today with Elizabeth, the trauma informed herbalist, or allow me to accept guests. And we're going to see if you weren't with us
Working?
yesterday. Yeah, it worked. Fantastic.
Yeah,
Fantastic to see you.
it's good to see you.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How have you been?
Pretty good. Pretty good, not jet lagged, which is nice.
That's good.
Um, yeah, that's always nice. Excited to talk to you. Have a nice, warm, and cozy cup of tea with me.
Yeah,
Just to be prepared. I know. So, how are you feeling today?
I'm pretty good. It's been a good week.
Well, that's always nice to hear, even though it's only Tuesday. Yeah, it's always nice. But, excited to talk let to me you. See. There we
Yep.
go. Because I've got me. I can see me on the TV screen, but I didn't need the volume on. Okay, so let's get started. I want to introduce you to people who may not know who you are. We met through yoga. You, in my opinion, still lead the best restorative yoga classes. And I just love your restorative yoga classes. And through that connection, I learned that you are an herbalist with a trauma-informed focus. So let's start by telling everybody, what does that mean?
So, trauma-informed herbalism is more a way of practicing herbalism. So, when we focus on being trauma-informed as a practitioner, and this is very similar to trauma-informed yoga, we're paying attention to things that we might need to adjust. We look at ways to make sure that our class feels as safe as possible for people, that the space that we're in feels as safe as possible, that we're using languaging that feels comfortable, and we do as much as we can to make things as safe as possible. Doesn't mean it's going to be perfectly safe. But one of the things I really focus on with herbs is finding things that help people based off of their nervous system state. So there's a lot of focus on polyvagal theory, a lot of somatics, like what are you noticing happening as you're working with this herb. And one of the things that I really love about the work that you do with grief, because I know your focus is as a grief specialist, and this is the time of year where it's so difficult. There are so many things that can come into play. There's family dynamics. There's a sense of loss. And of course, here in the Northern Hemisphere with the dark of the year, a lot of the times less sunlight means people feel a little bit more gloomy. And I think it's really important to honor that, especially during the holiday season.
Absolutely. And one thing I know that we can do with that are like warm drinks, um, meditation, journaling, as I say, restorative yoga, yin yoga. But this is where herbalism can come into play. Full disclosure, I was also a client
Mm-hmm.
of Elizabeth for her. I had an herbalist, and she talked to me about my situation, mainly stress related, and my goals, blood pressure, and was able to talk to me about what scents I liked, have me test out different scents and note my reaction, whether it was herbs or tea, oils.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you go about the whole thing of figuring out, because it's not like a one size fits
Right,
all.
right.
So, for
So,
example, if, like you were mentioning, we may get gloomy when we don't have so much sun. So, for example, how would somebody turn to herbalism and know what to do for that?
So where I encourage people to start, if they're going it alone and they're just trying some stuff on their own, I encourage you to start with teas. So what are some herbal teas that are available to you? Things like chamomile, lavender, passion flower, lemon balm. These different herbs that we use a lot in teas tend to be very helpful for the nervous system. You'll see a lot of them called nervines or nervine herbs. And when you have people, oh, hey, I see a couple of people I recognize on here. Hey, y'all. But when you have people you have these different herbs that can be helpful for the nervous system, it's not that it's going to stop you from feeling anything. It's more that it helps you feel supported as you are moving through whatever that phase is. So emotions are not supposed to be suppressed. We are supposed to feel them, but the herbs a lot of the times can help us to feel a little bit more supported as we're dealing with that. And so again, things like chamomile is one of my favorites. I keep talking about it right now because it has such an uplifting energy to it. And of course, if
people think about it, it's to put you to sleep. So you're saying it actually has uplifting
so
value.
it's not energizing. Energizing isn't necessarily uplifting. Yeah. I love that you're having me talk about that because those are kind of two different terms. If I'm looking for something energizing, I'm going to be looking for more of the spicy things, maybe an orange spice tea, maybe a green tea, which of course is going to have a little caffeine in it. Things like that have a little bit more of an energizing feel to it. Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways that you can play with it. But I'm looking for smells that I enjoy. I'm looking for tastes that I enjoy. A lot of this, when you're working with this kind of thing on your own, a lot of the times it is, what do I notice my body resonating with as I'm using it?
Okay, I love that. And I want to go back to something that you said. Like, we're supposed to feel emotions, but where we can get overwhelmed is when we feel as if our emotions are overtaking us and impeding our ability to function. And so you said you can use teas to uplift you and feel supported. I love that. So can you talk a little bit about, because when you are, maybe holiday stress has you down, or if you're grieving the loss of a loved one, what would uplift even feel like in the form of a tea? Because it's not like you say, it's not going to be some instant fix. You're still not going to feel sad, but maybe you can sit with it for a little while. Or what will uplift support feel like when you're feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah, so right now we're getting a little bit more technical, but some of you may like that. I really am very strongly interested in the connection between certain herbs and the polyvagal theory. So the polyvagal theory was created by Dr. Stephen Porges, and he was trying to understand why certain signs of the vagus nerve indicated that somebody would thrive, while other signs that came from the vagus nerve indicated an impending issue. And that's when he realized there's really kind of two parts to the vagus nerve, which is part of our parasympathetic system. So in the polyvagal theory, and it's a lot more complex than this. This is just a very quick overview for y'all. Like, I have done a class for the American Herbalist Guild on it that lasted for 4 weeks and was several hours long. Like, this can be a lot of conversation. But for our purposes, the polyvagal theory has 3 main nervous system states, and they have hybrid states. They can overlap like a Venn diagram. But for our purposes, my focus is, we have the dorsal vagal shutdown. That's where, like, we just lose all of our energy, can't get up, we'll stare at the wall for hours, right? And you have your sympathetic fight or flight, where you've got to get moving. Either you've got to move towards the threat or you've got to run away from the threat. So you have those two things. You have dorsal vagal shutdown and you have sympathetic fight or flight. We have a third that's called the ventral vagal. And that's where we are in really kind of a connected, soothed, feeling really supported state. Now, neither sympathetic nor dorsal vagal, so sympathetic fight or flight and dorsal vagal collapse, are both good states to have. There are times where we want these states, but when we become overwhelmed by these states, that's where we want to try to find something that will help us move back into that spectrum that feels more tolerable for us. When somebody is in sympathetic, fight or flight, lots of energy, jitteriness, jumpy, like you hear a loud noise and you just jump out of your skin, like way overreacting, that's very fight or flight. That energy needs herbs that will help us to soothe and to calm. So a lot of the times I'm looking at things like lavender is going to be one that's very soothing.
Prescribed for me, recommended for me. And I never even thought that I could drink lavender tea. I know I use it in the essential oil form for
Yes,
calming in the evening, or you don't doesn't even have to be in the evening, and spray pillowcases with it or put in the
yes,
diffuser. You could
yes,
have a bath.
exactly.
Where literally where does the vagus nerve run? Because I know
Yeah.
it's
So
down
the
the side.
vagus, yeah, the vagus nerve runs from the base of your neck kind of down beside, oh, I'm doing the wrong side here. Base of your neck down, because I'm watching myself in the camera.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
know.
down by your heart and down into your digestive tract. So the really cool thing about the vagus nerve is that it has some control over your facial expression. It has some control over your vocal intonation. It has some aspects to do with your heart rate, and it has some aspects to do with your digestion. And it takes all of that information and feeds it back up into your brain to tell your brain how the body's feeling as well. So it's a really important part of the nervous system and that sense of like, are we okay? Are we feeling safe enough for healing or for being able to enjoy our holidays? So when you've got that sympathetic, really energized state, we want things that help us start to feel calm, relaxed, kind of coming back down some. Now, if you try to use those when you're in a collapse state where there's no energy left, sometimes it helps, but more often it can actually make you feel even worse.
Hmm.
So I had to use a chamomile and lavender tea because of some of the physical benefits. And I
Hmm.
was in a collapse state and it was very emotionally difficult. So what I did was I added orange to it because a lot of the
Hmm.
citrus, orange and lemon and things like that, and I'm talking teas. You can do this with essential oils to inhale as well, but we're talking like ingesting teas. I had orange peel that I added to this blend so that I was still getting the physical analgesic effects from the chamomile and lavender, but at the same time, it wasn't taking my nervous system, it wasn't depressing it as far. So when we have that collapse state where we just don't have
Hmm.
anything left, we're just tapped out, that's where we're using the more energizing herbs. So lemon balm can be a good one. I like lemon balm because it can almost be used in either situation. I talk about it sometimes for sympathetic and I talk about it sometimes for dorsal. But one of the things it's really good for in the winter months is that dorsal.
Mm. So it's okay. So you're an expert, so you know how to blend and customize for your needs. And what about
Yeah.
dosage? Like you can't overdose on tea or drink too. Can you drink too much tea?
You could, yes. If you're just drinking 1 or 2 cups of these kinds of teas, you're going to be all right. If you are drinking a tea that has like kava in it, then those kinds of like stronger nervines might be something that you need to check with your either if you've got like a GP that understands herbs, then maybe go that route. Or if you have like a clinical herbalist in your area, you might be checking with them and making sure you're using the right things. Licorice is used as a sweetener a lot. And while I don't have the same level of concern about licorice that a lot of people have, because there's a lot of conversation about, oh, it can shoot your blood pressure up. It's not quite that simple. And a cup of tea with licorice in most situations is going to be okay because it's a very little amount that's used for sweetener. But if you did drink on that all day, all day, all day, and you drank 10 or 12 cups, it might be a problem. So
Hmm.
there's things like that that you have to consider. But just drinking a couple of cups of tea a day can be okay. Now, if you're wanting to get into therapeutic dosing and things like that, that's something that, y'all will want to work with an herbalist, a clinical herbalist to figure out because
Like
we can't, like
you.
on this slide, yeah, like me.
And people can work with you like I did virtually, meeting
Yes.
by video and things like that. Okay, so I'll make sure, well, your information's already in but I'll make sure to share that again.
Yeah.
And so what kind of the thing, okay, so what about, so we talked about with teas. What about, oh, and this isn't, well, I don't know. What about ginger tea? Is ginger an herb? But what about,
Yeah. Yeah, so ginger tea has that warming, spicy feeling that makes it very uplifting, but also a little energizing. So for me, ginger, anything kind of spicy, anything that really warms the body up is going to be really helpful in that dorsal vagal space. And that's the beauty of this. Like, some people love ginger, right? Ginger's the best thing. Other people are like, oh gosh, please don't give me ginger. And in that case, you can go for some of the more citrusy stuff. So yeah, there's all kinds of different options out there. And this is a starting point. I tell people when we talk about polyvagal herbalism and kind of some of the somatic stuff that I deal with, this is a starting point. Then we have to see, like, how do you, like, what comes up for you when you're doing this? How is it feeling inside? And then we adjust accordingly. Because everybody's a little bit different and everybody's been through slightly different things. And so sometimes it does take a little bit of adjusting and pivoting to get exactly what you need for yourself. But see these kinds of public conversations, if you've listened to our podcast episode or anything like that, those are good starting places to see what you might try to begin with, and then adjust it as you need to get what would work best for you.
And when you're working with someone, what are like the other complementary practices or things that you look at, like what they're doing, or advise them to consider?
Yeah. So I'm actually in the yoga therapy program. So I do a lot with yoga. Yeah. So I finished the first year the other day. So I do a lot with yoga and movement medicine as well. But there's that, yoga, movement. I also do a lot of energy work. I'm a Reiki master. I do a lot of other types of energy work. I've been studying Ayurveda. I'm finishing that up this next year. I'm supposed to finish this year, but case studies are there's so many. But I have some of those tools in hand. So there's a lot of different ways that we can look at this. And that includes, like what we talked about, some more of the Western herbalism side of things and essential oils. I'm a certified aromatherapist. And so, like, there's just so many different ways that we can do this. And when I work with people, I'm not trying to force them to do things. Like, I don't have a very specific protocol because everyone's situation is different. I have some people, they come to me and they're like, look, just give me a list of the supplements. And I'm like, okay, here's your supplements. Other people come to me and they're like, look, like, this alone is pressing my bank account. I can't afford to buy $500 worth of supplements. And I say, that's good. Like, we'll work from a different angle. There are different ways to do this. There are different ways to make this work. It is not a one size fits all.
No. Let's talk about 3 things that you mentioned that you also do. So what is Reiki? You say it's connected to energy. So what is that?
Yes. So Reiki is a form of energy healing that was created by Dr. Usui, and it was specifically so there's different forms of energy work that work with your subtle energy flow that's in your body, right? Acupuncture technically works with those meridians and the subtle energy flow that goes through the meridians. And in Reiki, there are certain symbols that you can use and there's certain hand movements, but it's essentially you're just considered like a vessel, and the energy goes where it needs to go. So it's almost like it's an own universal intelligent energy. And I'm in a group, shout out to the Distance Healing Network, which I've been part of we figured 22 years the other day. I was like, oh my gosh. Yeah, and they're an amazing group that does free things. I think it's thedhn.com, but if you look up Distance Healing Network, if you're needing just some Reiki, you can request Reiki and prayers through that, and volunteers send every week. So there's some really cool stuff with Reiki, and there's other forms of energy work. There's sound healing. I have tuning forks that I use that are specifically tuned to certain solfeggio frequencies, and then I use singing bowls that are tuned to the C scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, and B. And so a lot of that type of stuff you can use to help the brain get into a more meditative state, which can help the nervous system say, oh, okay, we're at a place right now where we can start to feel a little bit more softened and unwound. So there's a lot of stuff on that front as well.
Okay, is that something that can be done online, or you have to be in person? You can do it online. Okay, and what the other thing you mentioned is you're getting certified in Ayurveda nutrition, or? No,
so the Ayurveda, it's the herbal system. Now, there is some nutritional conversation to be had in Ayurveda. So there's different types types of foods that people will eat based off of their underlying constitutions. And there's actually some conversation about polyvagal theory and how it parallels with certain of the mental states in Ayurveda. So it's really interesting. My master's of public health is concentrated in functional nutrition. But I don't spend too much time I have a functional nutrition background, but my focus when I talk about food is less about like, what do you weigh? How many calories are you taking in? Like, that's not an interest to me. I want to know, like, are you eating vegetables? Are you able to eat more fruits and veggies? Because even that alone, they're starting to find that even just eating more fruits and veggies can actually give your body what it needs to flush out other stuff, to have better processes. It can help your nervous system. So that's really my main focus when it comes to nutrition. But yeah, for Ayurveda, it is the traditional sister science to yoga.
So how are herbs used in Ayurveda? Like teas as well?
Teas, they can be used in, now my Sanskrit is failing me, Abhyanga, which is like a massage. Like you can put them into the oils for the massage and things like that. Khichdi has, it's a traditional food that is made, and you can put different spices in it. I think a lot of people are really familiar with golden milk, which has turmeric in it. So there's a lot of different things like that that people can use through Ayurveda. So
Okay. Fantastic. And I think the third thing I was going to ask you about is yoga therapy, because some people may not know what's the difference between yoga, them going to a yoga class, and them having having a yoga teacher or instructor and having a yoga therapist.
Yeah, so in a yoga class, even like a one-on-one yoga class, you are working through the yoga flow. With a yoga therapist, they are hearing what the concerns are. Like, we're taught how to do clinical notes on yoga, and they're talking about what the concerns are, what you've got going on, and then the yoga therapist walks you through an actual protocol based off of what you've got going on. So there's a lot of that kind of thing that can get really interesting. But I think one of the things that I really love about it is there's all this complexity that I do. And that's just because of my brain. Like, I like complexity. But at the end of the day, a lot of this is about compassionate witness. A lot of this work is less about the super fancy schmancy tools that I get into because I'm in love with it. And it's more about compassionate witnessing, noticing what people are up against and holding space for what they're going through. And if you've got friends, like maybe you're going through grief yourself, right? And that is absolutely something I think that's important to consider. Like, where am I for the holidays? What do I need for myself? But maybe you have friends that you know are grieving, and maybe they don't want to come to the big holiday party, but maybe you invite them over for a cup of tea or coffee, and you say, I know you may be grieving during this time. I know that it's been a rough year, or losing this may have been hard. I want you to know that you and your grief are invited.
You know what? That is perfect that you say that, because that is so true. You feel like you can't bear seeing a bunch of people, but then at the same time don't want to be alone. Right. So that invitation for something intimate. And what would you serve when you said tea or coffee or something? What would you serve herbally? Like, how can you incorporate these herbs into festive situations? If you were having someone come over one-on-one, what would that cup of tea, could that be?
So I think for me, I would have a variety. So if you're a layperson and doing this, like, I don't expect you to go buy a bunch of different herbs, right? Because I've got like rose, right? Rose petals are very warming. They're very encouraging. There's like an emotional support feeling to them. You have calendula, which can bring in a lot of sunshine in the middle of, what can be a very dreary time of year. But if you're not in a situation where you have a bunch of herbs on your shelf, you can just go to the grocery store and find a few cups of tea that sound different, they sound interesting. And then when the person comes, you can say, hey, I've got this option, and this option. So you could get one that's kind of pepperminty, right? You could get one that's kind of floral. and then you can get one that's kind of fruity. So
What
minty,
would
floral, and
it,
fruity.
okay, so what? Okay, yeah. So what are the benefits of something pepperminty? What are the benefits of something floral? And what are the
Yeah.
benefits of something fruity?
Yeah, so the floral things tend to be very, like, people think of a lot of the floral herbs as being emotionally supportive. That tends to be a thing of a lot of the floral herbs. So it depends on the herbs that you get in there. But lavender, chamomile, rose, these are all very floral things. Sometimes you'll see jasmine, but not really. I can't remember if I've seen any in grocery store teas recently. Anyway, you can get some of these different teas that have the floral type components, and there's usually a very emotionally supportive aspect to them. And then, of course, like I was mentioning earlier, with like chamomile and lavender, they have a physical analgesic effect, but sometimes they can help with emotional pain as well. So if somebody finds themselves drawn to that, that may be some of the benefits they're getting from it. When you go for something that's minty, a lot of the times that minty sense has a little bit more of the uplifting. So going back to the sympathetic and the dorsal vagal, the floral stuff is really helpful for sympathetic fight or flight energy, right? The dorsal vagal is really helpful when, the minty can be really helpful for dorsal vagal. It can help bring energy, energizing sensation up. Now, it can sometimes help with sympathetic, but generally speaking, like dorsal is where I find it useful for most people. And then with, and there's also, if somebody has a lot of their emotional turmoil shows up in their digestive system, then the minty stuff can be very helpful for that. So like if anxiousness causes you to have digestive stuff, the minty type teas can be really helpful there. And then, sorry, my dog just came over and said hi. Hey, bud.
Oh, hello. Welcome.
And then for the fruity teas, there's the energizing sensation that we talked about before. But then there's also limonene in a lot of the fruits. So like orange and, a matter of fact, limonene is one of the main constituents that gives it that kind of citrusy tone. And that has been found to be very soothing on the nervous system, as well as very energizing. And matter of fact, somebody in the comments is asking about ginger, which we talked about a few minutes ago, but I'll say it again, like ginger, ginger and anything that's very warming. So like cinnamon and ginger and allspice and all of that stuff is very energizing. So if somebody is in a dorsal vagal where they're really kind of shut down, collapsed, don't have any energy, ginger can be really helpful there. And then ginger can also be really good for digestive stuff as well. And not everybody likes it, but when you do, it can be fantastic. And a lot of these herbs, notice a lot of the stuff we're talking about isn't just teas. A lot of this stuff is the same kind of thing that could be helpful with cooking and baking. You can put a lot of this stuff into your baking and use it that way. And no worries about not being here earlier. I'm glad you brought it back up because it means that y'all are thinking the same way. When you bring up ginger and it's something we've already talked about, that to me means that we're all thinking the same way. Like you're kind of on the same track as us, which is great.
Yes,
But
definitely.
yes, you can totally. I'm sorry.
Well, so just a question. When you say put that in baking, so it doesn't dilute, it doesn't lose the benefits, the properties aren't
It can
diluted?
lose some of the constituents, yes. So some of the aromatic constituents, otherwise we wouldn't smell it, right? Like that part of the aromatic constituents are lost. Yes, it can change it can definitely change the way that things are, like different pieces of the constituents. So some of the physical benefits can be lost, yes. But there are a lot of benefits that still continue to be there, even if you do use it in baking.
Well, because I know
If you,
we bake with cinnamon often and clove and all those
Mhm.
things, and they are aromatic. And I'm not, and when I think about it, that's good for you too, because when you smell that baking in the oven, how that makes you feel. So
yes.
that's a benefit. I just didn't know because I'm thinking, oh, I saw some special about teas, and I don't know if there was this particular type of green tea. It was a woman who was a specialist, but don't boil green tea
Mm-hmm.
because you can because you think you're adding boiled water to your tea, but the green tea, she said, don't. I don't know if it was that particular one because it can boil off some of the
Yeah, there's a
beneficial?
lot of different things like that. Like when I make herbal teas that are floral, a lot of the times I'll wait till the water has stopped simmering before I pour it in, because there can be like an extra bitter taste that comes out of it. It's like it pulls. I don't know if it's tannins, but in my mind, it's like when when a regular tea gets too hot and it pulls the tannins out and it's really bitter.
Mhm.
But for a lot of this stuff, like one of the things we find is that there's benefits to the raw versions of things, but there's also benefits to the cooked versions of things. And
Mhm.
so
What?
in this case, I'm sorry.
No, go
Oh,
on. In this case,
I
good.
thought
Yeah.
I heard something. I was like, what? Sorry, not trying to
Well,
run you over.
I do have a follow up, but what you were going to say is more important. Yeah.
Oh no, it's okay. No, I was just jabbering. Like the thing is that like it may change some of the things, but sometimes there are benefits to that. So if you find that you want to cook with it, and like you said, like the emotional benefit of smelling it and just like the memories, the positive sensation that can come from it, the scent memory connection is very powerful, and that can really change how our nervous system works. And if it's a stress relief, then absolutely go for it. I mean, apple cider on the stove, the apple cider is fantastic, but like even just having that, like, culinary simmer pot thing going on can be phenomenal. What was your follow up though?
Absolutely. And that's something easy. I was going to say, ask about tinctures.
Yes, yes. So if you're interested in doing tinctures, you can absolutely do them.
Tinctures. You say
Yeah.
tinctures. I said
Well,
tinctures.
and that may be my southern accent, y'all. I don't know. But if you're interested in tinctures, then you want to get some alcohol. Traditionally, people use vodka, but I use, because there's no taste to the vodka, right? So like you get a better taste for the herb. But I'm real big on brandy because it ends up tasting really good if you've got brandy with it. And you put the herb you put the herb in a jar, you put the tincture in, or the alcohol in with it, shake it every day for 2 weeks, and voila, you have your tincture. Now, those you do, hey, bud, I think we're going to have to go outside. I think he needs to go potty. Those you do, come on, bud. You do have to have, you have to pay attention to dosing, and that's very different depending on the herb. And so that's something that you'll want to get a book, or you'll want to work with somebody to find out exactly what works best for you. But yeah, that's absolutely an option. And a lot of the same benefits are there in a tincture, and you don't have to take nearly as much.
Okay. So tincture orally,
Yeah.
and I believe you can use a tincture on your skin. Is that true?
Um, you could. So a lot of the times for skin, I tend to do oil-based things because the oil-based extractions tend to absorb better into your skin. And so
So
you
that
can
would be
come up
more
with,
for treating the skin something and not necessarily reducing stress. But then you see
can
essential
be, yeah.
oils mixed into, yeah, essential oils mixed into creams and things. So that could
Hmm.
be a DIY thing. If you've got a non-scented cream, you could put
Yeah.
lavender oil, mix
Mhm.
that in when you massage your body to give. I'm thinking,
Yes,
yeah, I just didn't know if a tincture could help reduce stress that way as well. But that you could almost
it
make like
can.
a sachet or something,
Hmm.
um,
Well, and
just to be
the
calm.
pillow spray that you mentioned earlier, that's a really good one as well. Yeah.
Mm. So would you make like a lavender tincture? Tincture.
I have a lavender tincture. I have
Mhm.
the lavender and chamomile that I was telling you about that I ended up using. Once I realized that the tea was benefiting me, I went ahead and made the tincture out of lavender. I do all my herbs separate. So if you guys are looking at making tinctures and you want to make a blend, do the herbs separate and then blend them together. Because the thing is if you put all the herbs together in one jar and then you make one tincture, if something doesn't taste good, you're kind of out of luck.
Out of luck.
So, yeah, I definitely prefer to make them all separate and then go back through and blend them together. Because then, if I get too much of something, if something's a little too bitter, I can easily add some other stuff to it or whatever to make it taste a little better, or not do that particular blend the next time. But yeah,
How do you store
lavender
the
tincture.
tincture?
They don't smell quite as good. I mean, there's still some lavender smell, but they just don't smell quite as good as like the essential oils and things like that. But if you need a stronger dose of something, or if you're looking for a lot of those physical component benefits, like the analgesic effects, it can be fantastic.
How do you store those?
Once they're done, I try to always keep them out of sunlight, and I try to keep them in a cooler place. And once they're done, I tend to put them in like amber bottles.
And how long can a batch last? Yeah. How long does a batch last?
With alcohol, a batch can last 6 to 7 years. Technically, indefinitely, yeah. But the thing about it is, if you do, if you're doing alcohol tincture, at some point the constituents do start to break down. So I never make more than I think I'm going to need in about a year. But they will technically work a long time. And glycerites, which is kind of the non-alcoholic form, they only last about 3 to 4, but they can be beneficial as well.
So do you have a time where you do make batch tinctures?
I do.
Have herbal medicine course. Okay, wait a minute. Talk about that. That's right. I signed up for it.
I've got a free herbal medicine making course that's coming up. It's coming up starting in February. I had a friend that wanted me to make it available to everybody online. And so for a flat rate, I said, if you give me this much, then I can pull that time aside. I'll be happy to do it. It's just real expensive to get all the herbs and everything together. So I was like, if you'll get me this stuff, I'll be glad to do it. So they did. So thanks to an anonymous benefactor, we have a free herbal medicine making course coming up. And we'll talk some about, I won't spend too much time on it because that gets a little materia medica, but we will talk some about the individual dosing for different things. We will talk about teas a little bit and about when I do something longer and shorter. And we'll talk about tinctures and glycerites and gummies, and I think I've got lozenges on but yeah, it's going to be fun, and it's free, and it's online. And if you can't make it live, there'll be recordings.
Fantastic. Yeah. You know, I just love today, and I'm feeling proud because I've got almost everything. I couldn't find that passion flower. It's hard to find. So I'm going to have to get that from you again, your source for that.
So I get a lot of my stuff from Star West Botanicals, and I will tell you there's some concerns around some of the stuff that's going on with the Israel-Palestine situation, and so a lot of people are moving to mountain rose herbs instead. Okay. But for just you and me privately, y'all, I don't have like a ton, but like if you want me to mail you some while you're still here in the States, like just let me know later and I can get you some, because
I appreciate that.
I've got a little, I've got a little left.
Say it again, Mountain
Rose Herbs is one of the sources people are switching to, yeah.
Okay, for fresh and dried herbs. Okay, well, thank you. I am one of the people that's going to miss somebody this Christmas. It'll just be, the second Christmas without Daddy. And it's to the point where I have been giving out tips for how to manage grief around the holidays. Tips I wish I had before, right? But one of them is, and I do this, I made these little mini Christmas trees, one for my mother, one for my sister, with using like his handcuffs and tie tacks and different pins as ornaments on the tree. And I asked them to pick each of them to pick their favorite tie of his, and I wrapped the base of those. And we keep those out on all year. They don't have like a star on the top or whatever. They're little memorial tree, mini trees. So I've got that. So I encourage people, maybe try a tradition. You can do something like that if it's new and you still have those items. But if it's not, maybe incorporate their favorite dish if you're not doing that into the meal, or if they had a favorite song that they like to listen to. And maybe do this with one of these teas that we learned from Elizabeth, so that you can sit in your feelings, experience your emotions, feel supported, and feed yourself as well as honor that person's memory. So, and it's also a good way to calm down if you're out there stressing about the menu or shopping. The holidays can, as Elizabeth said in the beginning, can bring up a lot of emotions. Yep. And things. So know that you can take 10 minutes and have a cup of tea and change your perspective. So that's good to know. Thanks for all the tips today.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it anytime. If anybody needs me, y'all know where to find me. Like I'm happy to answer any questions, and just know that you are not alone. Like there are a lot of us that deal with a lot of very, very, sad emotions during the holidays, and it can feel like there's not space for that. But there is, and there are people out there, and it is okay to grieve, and it is okay to have those moments. We have them.
We have them.
We have them.
And Stephanie, who's I think she may be in Mexico, but I know she lives in Europe. Now she wants to do teas, tinctures, and have an afternoon with both of you. You're amazing. Agreed. That sounds like a date. We need to make that happen one time. So thank you. Love you so much. Happy holidays. And I know I'll see you in your class starting in February.
I'm looking forward to it.
Me too. Bye. Thank you.